Good evening to everyone. Now, today, the next class is the sheep farming in India. In the earlier class, we have learned about the goat farming in India, and till before, we had learned about the cattle farming in India and its economy, etc. So, today it is the time to turn on towards the sheep farming in India, and directly will come to the house and management is concerned. Sheep housing plays a pivotal role in case of commercial sheep farming, as you know, and one must invest very less. At the same time, one should not have the compromise towards the quality of the sheep house in terms of the protection what we need to give to the sheep, and it depends upon the size of the population of the sheep in a flock, and it is also required that such houses should give the sheep with adequate health as well as the productive and reproductive performance. So, the importance of the sheepyard include number one, the protection of the sheep from the natural environmental calamities like too much hot and too much cold, and at the same time, they should be protected from the predator animals like dogs, sometimes snakes, and jackals, fox, and also the human thieves. So the another thing is providing the shelter to them during the day and night in the extreme situations. So the covered as well as open space should be there in a sheep rearing for both depending upon the number of sheep to be maintained, especially the sheep. And the site and location of the sheep shed needs to be on elevated and open drained plot. So in case of three-sided shelter, open side should be faced south. Open side should be faced south, avoiding the prevailing of the especially the proper wind, and easy access to the delivery of the manure, and especially the manure should be in a well ventilated area so that more and more ammonia should not accumulate and cause the problem. The water and electricity connection is very essential, as we know that they are required for so many purposes, and they should be located very near to that of the sheep shed is concerned. Whereas the different types of the sheep housing is number one, open housing system for sheep, as we know that the nomadic sheep or the regular sheep shed, especially in some villages, is there, and this is most popular in areas where rain is completely zero or less, no rainless or no rain area, or it lacks a roof and the floor is made up of the straw or the simple mud. It is one of the most simplest form of the sheep housing. Then another thing is the semi open housing system, and this is for the bordered by fences, barbed fences with straw floors that have a very small roof, means half covered and half there is a freedom for walking to the sheep is concerned. Then the next one is bound sheep housing, and this is completely roofed with floors which are slightly or fully concrete in nature, and this is very effective for commercial sheep farming especially. Whereas the small sheep shed and barn are there, and these can be built within 2 days, whereas 240 square inch for a small flock of sheep in a climate that requires the minimal shelter. So these are all certain residential or the housing types required for the sheep for proper management of this thing. Whereas another thing is the pole buildings, and these are built for poles with damp conditions with height of 1.5 to 2 meters from ground level, and these are appropriate for especially the areas with the possible flood, wherever we can get lot of flood, etc. We should have such type of the shed. Whereas in this particular type of the this thing, we need to have sufficient number of the sheep head, especially for rearing. Then the hoop shelters are the one which are really set up for convenient of the sheep farming, and these are less expensive than that of the traditional wooden buildings. Effective equine facilities are also for the sheep also is another thing. And this is the hoop shelter where in which we have the guarding materials like this type of the sheds, which is asbestos sheet or whatever it may be, with the straw as protecting the ground. And another thing is, so these are all the shelters for sheep. This is the closed cell shelter with the cement concrete. Then many such type of the things are also available in different part of the India is concerned, and it depends upon the place and where. For example, sometimes whenever there is a wind is there, then it need to be covered properly from some types of the protecting things. Then requirement of for developing an idea of, she said, the land is supposed to not to be impacted by the wild winds, especially then predators and floods, and the space needs to be kept always dry. The shed can made an elevated area so that the water stagnation should be avoided. Then cross ventilation along with the ground airflow is preferable for sheep farming. And another thing is low cost material should be used for, especially for the capital investment should be very less, so that we can get more and more margin of profit. Then shed should be made at clean and dry place. The housing needs to be very well ventilated. The sections must be made for keeping the sheep separately on basis of age and health. And there should be a partition for feeding area. There should be a separate partition for feeding area, so that whenever the feed is put, the sheep should not get stamped on each other. Then there should be a gable roofing that can be considered for sheep rear in case of small housing setups. So a lean type of the roofing is preferable, means even low height is also preferable whenever there is a sheep shed is very small. Then clean and fresh water need to be used for cleaning the shed and feeding area. So always the clean water should be available, and these are all the general things. There should not be any restriction on the length of the shed, but it is better to build the house within a width of 24 feet to 30 feet. So if there is a question that what should be the recommended length and width of the sheep farm, it is approximately the 24 to 30 feet, the standard size. The shed can have one or more gates made up of wood or iron bars. The suitable dimension can be 1 meter into 1 meter always. And the roof of the sheep shed is a little bit lower, but always it should be constructed with a proper floorings, etc. Then the floor should be strong wooden battens can be used for flooring material, or the width of each plank needs to be between 7.5 to 10 centimeter. In between this thing, especially we should put about 7 to 10 centimeter gap should be there, and thickness should be 2.5 to 4 centimeter in case of wooden batten flooring. And there should be a clearance of 1.5 to 1 centimeter for two of the disposal of the dung and urine, because you know that the dung or the droppings of a sheep are very small in size and they are about 1 centimeter in size. Then they should be easily passed instead of being the heap over the area where the sheep are reared. So the flooring is generally constructed at height at about 1 meter above the ground level, 1 meter, minimum 1 meter, with a sustainable ramp case added in case of the wooden batten. So another thing is there should be a pedestal of especially wall of 15 to 30 centimeters should be built in case of the morum flooring. So the flooring should be made up of the morum or brick or sharing storeroom along with the shepherd's house should also be located in the same thing. Then the roof may be made gabbled. Plain or other steel sheets or asbestos sheet can be used for roofing material in case of areas with heavy rainfall. This is important. Wherever the heavy rainfall is there, like the Malnad areas or the areas like Kodagu, etc., one should be reared, should with proper sheltering. Then the gate. One or more gates can be built either on long board side of the shed on the basis of dimension of the sheep shed. So the gate can be about zero point 0.8 meter, means 800 centimeter, then 1 meter height also approximately. Frame can be made up of the wooden battens and the gate needs to be fit entrance. So apart from this one, the manger. Every sheep shed should have a separate manger with made up of cement or the wood that can be used to make manger with two compartments. Two compartments for providing fodder to the sheep. And separate hay rack can also be built at the level below the head of the sheep. The manger can be risen 450 to 600 millimeter from ground with the help of some clamps, etc. So that can be done. And the water should be made up of the created by fixing hanging hooks. There should be hooks, and it can also be portable. Then the size of the manger can be altered according to the number of sheep present in a specific yard. Always it should be a very specific thing. Then apart from this thing, you see how much dipping tank should be there in every sheep farm. So these dipping tanks are generally made up of protecting the sheep from the infections which is happening due to the contagious nature of some of the bacteria or the virus. And these are made up of galvanized steel or bricks based on the financial resources and availability. The tank can be bedded on concrete at one side the yard. Then footbath should be made. It can be made up of steel sheets as well as the brick or made from the cement also. But we should see that there should not be any leakage, and it should be always in the entrance of the yard for avoiding foot rot, especially which is caused by Spirophorus necrophorus in the sheep. These footpaths can be planted on soil. Then bedding material is a crucial factor for economics of the production of the sheep, especially without regular bedding and offspring production. So what happens is appropriate time sheep rearing will not be profitable at all. So there should be regular bedding, and we should also change it very regularly to avoid the dampness, especially which is accumulating in the bedding. And also it should be made free. Suppose the dropping, etc., it is there, it should absorb the urine content, very less ammonia, etc. Then selection of the livestock is one of the important step, especially which increases the possibility of achieving the desirable qualities, especially in the offspring. Hence, we should be very careful while selecting a sheep for performance as well as the growth. And the there are following criteria are there. The preferable ratio of RAM and EV is always 1 is to 20. One should remember the preferable ratio of RAM to sheep is 1 is to 20 in case of breeding management practices, BMP. It is always a very common thing, and one should note this point, 1 is to 20. Then apart from this one, there should be young rams may be put with older ewes, especially then older ewes, and the other hand, the older rams can be put with younger ewes for improving uh, the mating chances. And inbreeding is least recommended, means always one should avoid the inbreeding. Inbreeding is very less recommended. So we, as far as possible, always we should change the inbreeding or the rams timely, etc. We should always change. Okay, that's one of the thing to be remembered in sheeping. So the male sheep are supposed to be replaced every 2 years and female ones after 20 to 24 months, considering the health conditions if inbreeding is considered. So this should be a regular practice, 1 is to 20. Then every 2 years the male should be changed, and 20 to 24 months the female should be changed. And younger females are better to avoid breeding as it results in increased mortality rate due to the dystocia and other conditions. The body weight of the EU should be preferable less than the body weight of a adult sheep. It should be always less. Consumption can be increased if two services are practiced with a interval of 8 to 10 hours. That's always preferable, especially in case of the sheep. Then ewes that do not get back to the Easter cycle can be considered as positive to the pregnancy, but always one should, if there is a doubt, that they should be confirmed with ultrasound method from that of the non-pregnant ones, and they should kept separate, especially from non-pregnant ones. Then apart from non-pregnant and also from the males, sometimes there is a chance that the males may mount the females. So this should be always kept in mind. Then the sheep which do not have a kids for at least for a year are supposed to be kept out of the flock, and they can be used for the meat purpose or the mutton purpose. So the kidding procedure can be avoided during the peak winter seasons because of the uh, heat stress to the new ones, or sometimes there is a chance that they may die due to the pneumonia. That's another thing to be remembered. Any sheep must be kept out of starvation during the early pregnancy period, as it has possibility to result in a higher percentage of shed embryos to be embryos. So they should be always given with adequate quantity of the water, clean food, and also the adequate food which need to be supplied always. Or else there is a chance that more and more embryo absorption. Then pedigree. Pedigree means a very large scale amount of the record of some, that's the antecedents or purity of a particular breed. What breed you are supposed to bring is, we'll go get it later. Pedigree flocks diverge from commercial ones in that the sheep are pure breed and are typically registered with their solitary breed society, means there are breed societies are there to maintain the pure lines of a particular sheep or goat. Then we should purchase them from that particular society. Usually at the premium prices, a pedigree flock can be impart opportunities to sell breeding stock to the other breeders also. So that's how inbreeding should always be it should be avoided. So based on the phenotype of the, if of the farmer's village based genetic enhancement activities should be done, and and execution of pedigree recording scheme should be built up, and selectively choosing breeding stock in a village flocks, and these should be acknowledged to the phenotypic breeds across the generation. Means a pure record should be maintained, especially even with the village condition also. The pedigree of the sheep need to be maintained very properly. That is the most wanted thing, especially in case of the sheep farming is concerned. Then sheep record keeping is another important step to note. Then breeding record has to be kept, and it should be purely commercial flock, pedigree flock. Then breeding records when the breeding has done, when the animal has especially kidding is done, then the advantages of profits rather than the others. So in the process of method of the data collection and keeping overall the records of the sheep, the size of the flocks will no doubt impact on it. Hence, the breeding records are very important for a sheep farm. And the record to be kept are the lambing records, the weight records, lambing records and weight records especially, and weight records and breeding traits with uh, inception of EID data collection especially, so that were feasible to huge commercial flocks without the requirement of remain updating their books or records. So it's very much essential for a big commercial farm, but even small farmers, they also do remember, sometimes they write on the calendars or some diaries, etc. Hence, the record keeping is always it is a must thing. And there are different types of the breeding aspects, such as tupping to weaning, then including embryo implantation, then scanning, automatic identification of sire on gestation, then lambing records, then ease of lambing. Was there any dystocia or it was a normal this thing? Then there are the problems of lambing. Sometimes the sheep may have the prolapse of uterus also, then sometimes the prolapse of vagina, and sometimes the abortion incidences are uh, very common in case of sheep flock, and they should be always written either in the properly recorded manner. Sometimes the digitalization is also done. That's always better, meeting the records, especially in the computer. But even manual entry is also not a problem. So there are different analytical methods for lambing and their problems. The number one is breeding, disease, and pedigree relation, and the weighing, especially sire and dam. How much a dam or the sire or the male or female, they should be weighing during the type of the performance. That's how that should be the important recording. So this need to be incorporated for overall assessment of recording the data, and what is the occurrence of the disease, then especially weight of a lamb or sire is also need to be mentioned, especially in case of a breeding record is there. Then breeding practices and some reproductive parameters in sheep is very similar to that of the goats. The sheep is preferable breeding age is 6 to 8 months. They can be brought to heat after 21 days post lambing, even immediately after this thing. So the duration of pregnancy is about 144 to 152 days, or 4 to 4 months. Usually 120 days means into 4 months, or 4 to 4.5 months approximately in case of the sheep. The suitable male and female ratio is always 1 is to 20. The estrus cycle takes every 16 to 17 days, and it lasts for the average 24 to 36 hours. especially in each period. So it happens. So the preliminary data to be remembered is the first breeding to be done at 6 to 8 months of age, and the estrus will happen after 21 days of post lambing. Then pregnancy or the gestation period is 144 to 152 days. Then 1 is to 20 is the size of male and female. Then the estrus cycle is 16 to 17 days and last for 24 to 36 hours. These are the very basic parameters one, especially the veterinarian, should remember. And preparation of the female for crossing is especially they should be fed with extra feeding. Their health should be maintained very properly. They should be given with adequate diet of the protein, and they should not get too much fattening, etc. So just before beginning up of the breeding, one need to do all these things to increase the ovulation rate to get multiply the number of twinnings. So more and more twinnings, more and more profit is also there. And flushing is done by giving 250 gram of concentrated daily for 500 gram of superior quality legume hay per head. And here there is a word called as the flushing. Flushing means nothing related to the water flushing, but it is a process of giving 250 grams of concentrates daily or 500 gram of a very superior quality legume hay per head every day. And flushing improves the rate of lambing to the extent of 10 to 20% always. So remember what is a flushing, then how it is going to do this, especially how it is going to increase the lambing rate. Then tagging should be done, especially a wool or tags inhibit them from satisfactory copulation, and trimming is done in rams and ewes before mating. And another term is there called as the EYEING, eyeing. In some breeds of sheep, the excess wool around the eyes should be removed regularly to prevent wool blindness. This is called as the wool blindness. More and more wool will cover the eye, and we should cover it with or trim it with a scissor, etc. And this process is known as eyeing. So this should be known as this eyeing. So this always to be made as one of the routine procedures. Then ringing just prior to the breeding season, the wool from the neck and from the belly, especially at the region of penis, should be clipped and trimmed. Is one of the thing. Then crutching is also another thing. In the beginning of the breeding season, wool is removed from the perineal region in the base of the tail of the ewe. This is called as crutching. See, so many terminologies are here, and you should remember, everyone should remember, the ringing is just prior to breeding season. The wool from the neck, from the belly, especially at the region of penis, should be clipped and trimmed, especially from the male, and this is called as the ringing. Whereas the crutching means in the beginning of the breeding season, wool is removed from the perineal region for the tail of the ewe, and it promotes the process of breeding very properly. The mating happens very properly. So male and female in a farm, and this the sheep should be looking good in healthy condition if they are fed properly. Then preparation of the male for mating to be done at the time of the mating, and marking the ram or the buck, marking the essential process of breeding. Ram is a male sheep, buck means a female sheep. And for this purpose, lamb black or ventilation this or Venetian red is mixed up with linseed oil to make paste and is applied on the brisket area. That's the minimum once in a week has to be done. And during the time of the mating, when the ram mounts with the doe, she will also be marked. So this is a process in which lamp black or Venetian red is mixed with linseed oil, then paste it in the brisket area, minimum once in a week, so that at the time of the crossing, the ram mounts with the doe, she will also be get marked, indicating that mating has happened. Then rattling is another process, is the harness of the ram that contain crayons. Then during the time of the copulation, when the rattle of the ram is rubbed on the ramp of the ewe, a color mark is left on the ewe. So that's called as the rattling. Ringing means just prior to breeding area, wool from the neck and from the belly is removed. Already we have told this thing. Then procedure of mating in a sheep is called as the number one, hand mating. Here, one ewe is allowed to mate with one ram by once at a time. Hand mating is one eve is allowed to mate with only one ram, one by one. On the other hand, ram is restricted to mate only three ewes in a day. Only three ewes in a day. It is beneficial when copulation occurs between older ram and younger ewe, etc. So it ensures the expected time of lambing and also improves the breeding efficiency of the ram. Then pen mating. Here the ewes are divided into batches containing 20 to 25 ewes in each batch, and males are turned into a flock only during the night time. So during the grazing period, it protects the ewes from disturbance from the ram also. So that's called as the pen mating. So about 20 to 25 ewes are put in a pen, and the males are turned into flock only during the night time. Then flock mating or pasture mating. Here the rams are put into run into the ewes throughout the entire day very freely. The male tends to lose most of its body fat when they chase females in this process. Due to the multiple copulation of a particular ram, ewes do not receive sufficient amounts of this spermatozoa and remain unconceived, so it decreases the fertility rate due to the multiple copulation of a particular ram as the sperm number goes down. And artificial insemination is also another choice. And in this, both fresh and frozen semen are already used, and the speculum method of insemination is used in this process. So the artificial insemination leads to lower reproductive rate than that of the natural process as usual, whereas the frozen semen gives even much lower fertility rate, and hence it's always beneficial to have the ram in spite of the technology is there, whereas it is a popular technique in the animals, especially the large animals. Then progeny testing means someone might have heard this term. What is a progeny testing? It is defined as the production of many offspring by mating a male with different types of females in different environmental conditions. So the progeny testing is extensively used in sheep farming for evaluating and selecting a superior quality breed for either wool or meat production. So this is depending upon the purpose for which we are going to rear. We need to do the progeny testing. Then once again, the progeny testing is used to determine the probable breeding value (PBV) of the parent stocks. Then it refers to the choice of breeding stock on the basis of their performance already, the performance, and hence this should be made. All this breeding, etc., need to be monitored properly to get a very good offspring. And advantages of progeny testing is this method is suitable for sex limited characteristics traits with low inheritability and slaughter traits. It increases the selection's accuracy also. It promotes the production of superior quality breed always. Advantages of this progeny testing is like this, and disadvantages of progeny testing is it's a time consuming process and expensive method due to the prolonged generation interval. Whereas the another disadvantage is genetic gain is very low and probability is uncertain, and it leads to the lack of the long run due to the inbreeding depression. So inbreeding chances are always there in this process, and one should see that the inbreeding should be as less as possible. Then nutrition, as usual, water requirement is very high, especially in case of the uh, sheep. Inbreeding is a very common thing, and we should have the outbreeding system means a different ram should be used always for a particular sheep flock. And sheep require more minerals during the time of long travel, especially, and they drink an appropriate amount of 2 to 3 liters of water per kilogram dry fodder consumed. Depending upon the dry fodder, they consume more and more, especially the dry fodder. Then the protein requirement of the sheep is not lactating, and stopped growing acquires optimum protein from forage along with the pasture. So a sheep needs at least 7% crude protein for their diet, not like the cattle, which require about 18% crude protein. The requirement of the protein in sheep varies in different stages of the growth. The demand for protein increases about 50% during the pregnancy, and especially 100% during the lactation also. Hence, one need to be very specific, especially nutrition part. And sheep can also convert NPN, just like the cattle convert non-proteinous nitrogens. Then, like the NPN, so many NPN sources like the urea is one of the NPN source, ammonium phosphate, and biuret protein into rumen and sheep by help of some microorganisms. So, ruminal microorganisms are also there, especially in this region. And the because of this particular thing, for maintenance of the body of the sheep, required daily digestible crude protein or DCP is approximately one tenth of the total digestible protein TDP, or 1 gram per kg of the body weight. To remember very simply, the digestible crude protein is about 1 gram per kg body weight. So the wool consists of a high amount of cysteine and methionine. 10% level of protein is adequate for wool production. So this is also another reason to get the methionine and cysteine are the two sulfur containing amino acids, and the protein level required is 10% level above the normal requirement is very much required for a very good quality wool. Then energy requirement of the sheep, coming to the nutrition part, the total digestible nutrient is required in higher amounts, especially in the lamb compared to the adult sheep. So similarly, energy requirement is higher in pregnant, then also lactating, and the breeding ewes than that of the non-lactating and non-pregnant one, especially this thing. So and should be very important that the total digestible nutrients should be properly maintained for different purposes, especially the mature ewe is not, if it is not lactating and pregnant and stopped growing, ewes require 10 grams of TDN per kg live weight, 10 grams of total digestible nutrients. So this is the maintenance ratio and also the production ratio. Deficiency of the energy affects reproductive health, growth, and also it may lead to some disorders, and sometimes the death also might have occurred. The death or the mortality pattern will increase. Then mineral requirement of a sheep is about the 15 elements are told as the very essential elements, especially the sheep. Whereas the seven of these out of 15 are sodium, chloride, calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, potassium, and sulfur. As the wool do contain methionine and cysteine, the sulfur should always be adequately provided. Sodium chloride or the salt is generally given at the rate of 0.5% in case of complete ration or 1% in concentrate also. So all these are very similar to that of the nutritional requirement of a, an adult sheep or to the cattle also. So always it is very much essential that one should be adequately given with that of the sufficient nutritional traits, and calcium is very much required for the growth, and also sheep which reared on good pastures and legumes do not suffer from any kind of the calcium deficiency, but or else it need to be administered exogenously. Then, apart from this one, the phosphorus is also required to the sheep. That's also most of the time the phosphorus is 0.16 to 0.19%, whereas the lactating ewes, the adequate requirement of the phosphorus is 0.23, or else they will suffer from some of the deficiency disorders. So, then the abortion of the production of weak lambs may occur if insufficient amounts of the phosphorus given to the pregnant ewes, and also to the extent of deficiency of the cobalt may lead to the anemia along with the iron deficiency. Rough hair coat is observed in sheep due to the deficiency of the cobalt, and 1 gram of cobalt chloride is generally given twice a week to correct the inadequacy of the cobalt deficiency. Then another thing is the copper, very much essential for melanin production. Copper or the cuprous plays a very significant role in formation of the wool. A methionine and cysteine, then copper. That's called as the keratin, which is the content of the wool, and up to 6 months age also is required. Whereas due to the deficiency of the copper, stingy wool is observed in case of the sheep. And zinc is another essential nutrient, and deficiency of zinc happens, and the size of the testicles will be less and can lead to discontinuation of spermatogenesis in ram lamb. Hence, a proper zinc should be administered to the lambs. And some of the vitamins are also required, even though they are the ruminates, they synthesize their own vitamins, B complex vitamins, but the vitamin A is very much required. And vitamin E is generally consumed with roughage, and deficiency of the vitamin E can lead to a disease known as stiff lamb disease. Stiff lamb disease. Then grazing land. What should be a grazing land? Should be there. Then it should be selected area, especially then that can be used for animal to graze, and it should be have adequate grazing area is very much required to reduce the cost of the production. So, sometimes it should be already well planned. Whenever you are about to rear a sheep, then we should get a planned grazing land, and grazing management plays an important role in sheep farming, and especially it useful to detect flaws by identifying the lack of sources. And if a sufficient grazing land is there, that will drastically reduce the cost of the feed in the form of the concentrates. Then goals for grazing up of the land, there should be the proper goals should be maintained, and there should be of specific that can be accomplished within a criteria of certain time period we should know. And simultaneously, the current development of the grazing land plan is supposed to be identified as well as a time period that can be set depending upon the progress. So once again, we should give sufficient weightage for proper time, and the litter production. Such overgrazed fields can be increased by 400 pounds per acre, and the operational goal is to decrease the wastage of the fodder by 25% each year with the help of forage utilization and rotating for 3 growing seasons. So everywhere we need to be very very scientific and calculative, especially for getting more and more profit out of the investment sector or any other industries. And plans for creating a grazing land should always be there, or else the many people they purchase the sheep and later they start searching the grazing land. It is not like that. We need to plan it very early, then get that infrastructure, then especially the condition of the land, and then it should be very well properly fenced. Then there should be a system for watering, and proper manpower is always required as per the Husbandry norms. And sometimes the electric fencing may also be required to avoid the predators to enter within the sheep shelter. Then temporary fencing can also be made, especially whenever the nomadic sheep, etc., are there. They should be confined the movement, and they can be done in different locations and during the different grazing seasons. So, in case of permanent one, the grazing field remains similar throughout the year, and you should put a proper type of the grass here. As usual, it's once again the repetition of the earlier thing. Sufficient water should be there, sufficient green land should be there, sufficient wind, etc., should be there. And sheep should consume, in adult sheep, 8 to 12 liters water per day, even though it is required depending upon the fiber content what it does eat. So they usually walk more than 1.5 kilometers in order to reach a clean water source. But highest limit of the distance to reach water is 2.5 kilometer. Or else many times we take the sheep for grazing, and because of the exercise, more and more exercise, they lose the weight. Hence, it is not recommended. And sheep are unable to drink water directly from the dugouts. So you may be knowing this particular thing. Directly they cannot drink the water from. Hence, they may require a trough. Then predators can have a negative impact on the growth, reproduction, performance, and many more factors because of the stress. So, what are all the things? The coyote, cougar, bear, and wolves. These are the most common types of the predators observed in the grazing land. Then dogs can also be employed for the purpose of protection of the livestock from predators also. So the turkey kangal, great Pyrenees, and other dog breeds are suggested for protecting the livestock. They are very well adapted, whereas the German Shepherd is one of the, or the Alsatian is a specific breed which is named as it is very good for sheep rearing. The requirement of grazing land, provide adequate rest properly, then proper plantation should be there, and the plants what we plant in the area should have sufficient proteinaceous nature's plant material, especially the leaves for photosynthesis and roots to uptake nutrients and water from the soil profile. So this is the indicative. Then balanced livestock demand should always be there. And what is the timing of grazing? Means it is always observed that plants remain the most susceptible to the grazing during summer as well as the spring, and this should be adequate resting period to grazing periods. So, animal distribution, sheep to graze repeatability around the areas, and that should be very familiar to them. And water bodies should be there always nearby. Then the grazing intensity affects root growth and regeneration. Always the sheep should not be left for grazing in a particular area. Then the root growth is generally stunted 50% when due to the continuous grazing and above ground biomass is removed. Then monitoring of the health status to be documented as starting point for decision making. This allows the manager to assess the impacts on pasture and their response to these impacts. And some monitoring methods are especially for that's the range and or riparian health assessments, range inventory, photo reference points, then grazing response index. All these are some monitoring methods, especially for the sheep. Then the contingency plan should always be there. So there should be a contingency plan for successful grazing and management. And several external factors, including drought, excessive moisture, as well as other environmental factors, can also affect the plan of the farming. So, importance of grazing land is always there because this reduces the feed cost to the extent of 30%. Then grazing land with own fencing etc definitely it will reduce the tie this theft, especially it's a great threat to the sheep farming, especially nomadic sheep, and this makes the decision making process regarding the farm easy for the farm manager. So if you plan very well, then uh, boosted financial stability will be established. Then mobile based identification, and nowadays it's a mobile era as per the digital well being is always adopted. Then the in the mobile itself, so many hundreds of mobile apps are there in the Google Play Store. So the productivity along the income generation can be increased with the help of such mobile based applications. There are hundreds. And the farmers should always be educated, guided, and timely. They need to be properly updated. The livestock management software plays a significant role, and the farmer should also be very well aware, including the veterinarian. There are so many livestock management softwares, many data like date of birth, date of medical record, when the animal has kept illness, and what are all the symptoms of the diseases, especially. They should be very well maintained. Then the importance of the vaccination, then medical record, then also the a deworming schedule, and sometimes we need to properly investigate the hematology and biochemical parameters, and also the deworming program and vaccination. But in spite of all these things, there are a lot of challenges are there. Lack of smartphone utilization in rural areas. So they cannot use the apps, which is based on the apps. And at the same time, the discussions that happen in the social media like WhatsApp or maybe the Facebook or any other thing are not so familiar to the Indian farmers. Internet connectivity, another problem. Lack of digital literacy is also another thing. Lower availability of the information about the livestock farming among the farmers is also another diverse, especially the husbandry practice. When app should be in there, local language is also an important thing. Then prevention measures of certain infectious disease, and also the therapeutic aspect of certain bacterial, viral, protozoan borne diseases will surely have the product and reproductive performance of the livestock. So directly it affects the economy. Then vaccination and deworming should be a very routine things, which are very two preventive measures which can be taken to prevent the spreading of such diseases. Then vaccination, there are classified into several categories. Some of the bacterial, antibacterial vaccines, antiviral vaccines, anti-protozoan vaccines, and so many. Antibacterial vaccine, number one, we need to vaccinate the animals for the clostridial diseases are there. And so many clostridial diseases, Clostridium perfringens type C and D, then Clostridium tetani are certain microorganisms which cause the endotoxemia, then make the animal to die. Then time of the vaccination is about 6 to 8 weeks, and once again the vaccine to be repeated after 3 to 4 weeks. But once again we need to see the manufacturer's instructions on each vial when it to be given, etc. Then foot rot is also another common problem. So the causative agent is, earlier it was called as the Spirophorus necrophorus, but now it is another name. Please remember this uh, name of the bacteria like Dichelobacter nodosus. So this is the bacteria that cause the foot rot, especially in case of the sheep. And the green negative, gram negative bacteria, these are all Dichelobacter nodosus are the gram negative bacteria. Then the foot rot after appearance of the symptoms, the revaccine between 6 to 6 months later. Never, one should not neglect, especially the vaccination. And cautious lymphadenitis is another disease where in which caseous, its a causative agent is Corynebacterium pseudotuberculosis. And timing of the vaccination is at the age of 3 months of these diseases, especially caseous lymphadenopathy. Then bacterial pneumonia is a very common thing. Pasteurella multocida, that's the Viverstania, and many more bacteria are very commonly, they are affecting the sheep. And the timing of these things are during breeding, uh, on eosine reactivation after 4 months. It's also required. Revaccination will always boost the immunity, and ovine angiotic abortion is also there, which is caused due to the chlamydia abortus. And timing is about 60 days before breeding. and revaccination should be done 30 days later. Two times vaccination to be done in a year. Then anthrax is one of the dangerous disease. Then also twice 2 to 3 week interval has to be done, especially vaccine. And antiviral vaccines are so many are there. Some of the deadly virus are infecting the sheep and reducing their population to the greater extent. So the sore mouth is caused by the RF virus, or it's also called as parapox virus. Whereas timing of this thing is 1 month, then the vaccination 2 to 3 months later. Then gluten is also another viral disease over 3 months of the age and revaccinate after 3 weeks before the breeding season goes. Then the causative agent of the rabies, as you know, it's a Lissa virus. Then over 3 months of the age, the vaccination has to be done. So the Q fever is another one which is caused by Coxiella burnetii. Then the timing of vaccination, 3 doses at least 3 weeks of before breeding. And all the progressive farmers do this thing. And if you do not have the knowledge, please learn it and inform the farmer. So most of the time the vaccination schedule is 12 to 30 months, especially the one in a year. Then brucellosis, a common disease of the sheep, causes abortion and also its zoonotic importance. It's called as the Brucella melitensis. Whereas contagion agalaxia is a disease that is caused by Mycoplasma agalaxiae. So the timing is it is inactivated as well as the modified. Live vaccinations are there, and we can order whatever the things which is available. And revaccinate after 6 months. Always most of the vaccines, the foot and mouth, anthrax, then gluten, etc. Leptospirosis, a major threat, especially in case of the sheep, then Leptospira interrogans, Sarovar, then Pomana, then Leptospira, then Borgoptersensi. So, over Harjo, this is the name of the Leptospira that's causing the disease in case of sheep. So the combined bacterians which were available at present in the market, and they should be always put to the sheep for the benefit effect. Then revaccination should always be done as and when required. Then another important disease of the sheep, in the forthcoming classes we may deal this in very detail. It is called as the attenuated vaccines against sheep strains which have been developed, then PPRV vaccine, the blue tongue vaccine, etc., and also the rabies wherever there is endemic area is there. Then deworming, of course, before deworming, always we should see the fecal egg count. And then sheep is one of the most common animals that are being farmed, so it is important to keep the sheep very, very healthy. Then the wool production is also another wool. Then if there are external parasites, then they will adversely affect the wool production. Then also the sometimes the fungal, bacterial, viral diseases are there. So because of the worm load, maybe trematodes or cystodes or nematodes, there is a burden of the type of these particularly, what we can say is the good health. So deworming is one of the important thing, especially the anti-cystodal drugs need to be properly administered. or else many type of the animals they pass the larva or sometimes the egg also, as we have seen. And the deworming is always, we need not give the deworming because most of the time the worms always consume the host food. That should not happen. Then the worms, what they do harm to the host is they ingest blood, causing anemia, then weakness, especially in case of the sheep. The life cycle of most of the worms are very similar, and we should the know and study what are all the types of the worms which are present in that area. And simply, if you administer different drugs, then it will get rid of. The fertile eggs pass through the body with manure of this earlier slide. Many time the especially the worm infestation is a art of management. So everyone should be more cautious about the diseases of the sheep. Then fertile eggs they will pass through the manure or dung. So sheep is considered as one of the most susceptible animal for parasites among all the other animals because it is got a very lengthy wool. Adult little resistance. So how many times one need to deworm, especially? So it depends upon the different books, etc., and also the worm load and many more. Then, if it is important to deworm the rams at least before a time period of 2 months to control the ecto and endoparasites, which are causing lot of economic loss to the shepherds. So, symptom of this disease, especially worm infestation, the steel use this sheep should stool should be dry and lack pellets, as seen in case of the photo. But we notice a change in the appearance of our sheep, the stool, something amiss, and you need to know what is going on. And if there is a change in the consistency, color, etc., then we have to consult the vet, or at least we should give the sample outside our area. Different strategies that are followed for deworming are salvage, salvage deworming, tactical deworming, and strategic deworming. So, what's a salvage deworming means? It is useful for controlling the animals hosting majority of the worms. So, this is the FEMACHA technique to identify the level of anemia in sheep. So, if we find the anemia, then we can uh, rear the sheep properly. So, tactile or tactical deworming means it involves the treatment of animals when the egg production rate is highest among the animal, and restricting the use of the defarmers during the low parasitic. And sometimes, what is a deworming schedule means they should be dewormed 3 weeks before the expected birth of their first lamb, then every 3 to 4 weeks thereafter until every 3 weeks old. So the you should be deworming 3 weeks before expected uh, giving birth. Then every 3 to 4 weeks they need to be dewormed, and later they thereafter till they are 3 weeks old, especially. So deworming will always remove the worms and hence prevents the anemia, then reduced appetite and nasal worms and others, and the to maintain the soil quality, the and also sometimes to maintain the health status. It is very very important. So they should be rams should be dewormed before 2 months of mating. Then the sheep will have roundworms, hookworms, pinworms, trematodes, cystodes, everything. So roundworms, sometimes the hookworms will also be there, and in the liver there will be liver flows, and there should be a sufficient zinc, copper, and selenium for optimum reproduction and sperm production. Post harvest management is also called as the sharing. Means sheep is the main source of wool, generate a sustainable livelihood for the people belonging to the economically weaker sections. Always it is there. Then sheep rearing is method in which the sheep's woolen or fleece is removed from the thin layer of the body. One should have a proper training for sharing. So in summer, the sharing should be done, especially not in winter whenever there is a severe cold, etc. So these animals are very specifically animals. Then types of sharing: hand sharing, machine sharing. So there are very special scissors will be there, and they will apply the pressure and remove the wool from the animals. So this is a skill-based project, how it can run, especially in case of the sheep husbandry. Then machine sharing with power, then sometimes the diesel engines also come, and nowadays the solar panel based systems do also exist. Slaughterhouse, of course, it is manual slaughtering is there, this mechanized and mechanized software. This are there depending upon the size of the animal. Big cities do have a very good slaughterhouse, whereas in case of the middle class cities or the, they do not have a proper slaughterhouse. The slaughterhouse should be built as per the pollution control board suggestion, not very near to the residential areas, away from the residential areas, and should get sufficient water. The slaughtering waste products like animal skin, fat, and non-consumables like the wool, etc., need to be collected and sent it to the specialized factory for further manufacturing. Even a small thing will never get wasted from the sheep. Hence, the training courses should be given to all the employees where in which a sheep farm is there, then definitely it will increase his manpower skill, and he can work under a veterinarian. Storage, especially the meat storage, then cold storage. Temperature is under 3 degrees centigrade Celsius. This meat can be stored how many days? 7 to 8 days maximum. Freezing can be done, then vacuum can be created. In case of the vacuum cleaning is It is done by the specialized equipments which eliminates the oxygen from the packaging. Canning be second most process of meat storage. Canning, drying. Then there are a lot of other procedures for meat production, includes the fermentation, irradiation, and curing and smoking. So this is a frozen meat. Everywhere we can see that type of the meat is there, and uh, by knowing all these things, we may be able to answer so many questions which may appear, or also otherwise also the knowledge will never go waste, and one should always respect the knowledge base. So organic manure will be obtained from the sheep, and it's of very good nitrogen fertilization. Then it is also sold, and already we know the economy of the sheep husbandry, etc. So concludingly, what we can say is, if we manage the sheep in a proper container with proper shedding, then proper nutrition and shelter will definitely increase the especially the economy of the farmers. That's about the today's class. Thanks a lot for the particular this thing, and